You keep calling it mixed signals because that hurts less than calling it what it really is. Silence that made your chest tighten. Distance that arrived without warning. Warmth one day, coldness the next. The way they looked at you like you mattered, then disappeared just when it started to feel real. And because you are human, because your heart is built to search for meaning before it accepts pain, you told yourself maybe they were confused, maybe they were busy, maybe if you loved them more clearly, more softly, more patiently, they would finally stay. But this is where it gets brutal. If you are waiting for an avoidant person to love you in the loud, obvious, overflowing way that anxious hearts recognize as love, you may miss the only moments when their love was actually real. Because avoidant love rarely arrives with a spotlight. It arrives in hesitation, in restraint, in the small internal wars you never get to see. And if you do not understand that, you will keep misreading distance as indifference, self-protection as rejection, and emotional overwhelm as proof that you were never wanted. That misunderstanding ruins people. Not because it makes them stop loving, because it makes them start begging. And the moment you start begging for clarity from someone whose nervous system experiences closeness as pressure, the entire dynamic changes. What could have grown slowly into trust becomes a threat. What could have been tenderness becomes escape. What might have become intimacy gets buried under the unbearable weight of your urgency. This is the part almost nobody tells you. Avoidants do not shut down because they feel nothing. They shut down because they feel too much and have nowhere safe to put it. That is the wound. Not emptiness, flooding. Underneath the calm face, the delayed texts, the detached tone, there is often a nervous system that learned early that depending on someone is dangerous, that needing is humiliating, that vulnerability costs too much. So when love begins to ask something real of them, when connection becomes emotionally expensive, the body reacts before the mind can explain it. The amygdala reads intimacy like exposure. The nervous system senses a threat where the heart senses attachment. Cortisol rises. The chest tightens. The body starts searching for escape, not because the person in front of them is wrong, but because closeness itself has become tangled with loss of control. And this is why the behavior is so confusing. An avoidant can want you, think about you, even miss you, and still pull away. They can feel dopamine in the chase, in the mystery, in the almost. But when the bond becomes stable, when it stops being fantasy and starts becoming emotionally real, the nervous system can interpret that stability as danger. Suddenly their body wants space from the very person their heart has chosen. They do not always understand it, so they translate overwhelm into logic. I'm not ready. Something feels off. Maybe we're not compatible. Maybe I need freedom. Maybe I just need time. Sometimes they believe those thoughts. Sometimes those thoughts are simply the mind's attempt to explain the panic. That is why avoidant love is so hard to recognize from the outside. It rarely looks like surrender. It looks like resistance to surrender. And yet, there is a difference between someone who is avoidant and someone who is simply using avoidance as an excuse to consume your love without offering any in return. That difference matters deeply. Because authentic love from an avoidant does not always look warm, but it does look sincere. They may not speak every feeling the moment it appears, but they circle back. They may need distance, but they do not enjoy hurting you. They may go quiet, but your pain eventually reaches them. They may struggle to let you in, but part of them wants to try. That desire to try is everything. Not perfection, not constant availability, not dramatic confessions. Effort. Real avoidant love often hides inside effort that costs them more than you realize. It is the text they almost did not send, the difficult conversation they almost ran from, the moment they admit, in a voice quieter than pride, that they are overwhelmed and do not know how to stay open. The way they remember what matters to you even when they struggle to express what matters to them. The way they come back, not because they got lonely, but because distance did not give them peace the way they thought it would. That is not nothing. That is a person wrestling their conditioning for a chance at connection. And still, here is the truth that may sting the most. If you respond to that struggle by chasing harder, explaining more, proving more, pleading more, you can accidentally become the very pressure that drives them further into themselves. Because one core concept changes everything here. Silence. Not manipulative silence, not punishment, not performance, sacred silence. The kind that does not collapse. The kind that does not beg to be chosen. The kind that leaves room for the truth to surface without forcing it to appear on command. When you stop reacting to every withdrawal as if it is an emergency, something shifts. Not only in them, in you. Because most painful dynamics with avoidance are fueled by the panic of interpretation. They go quiet, and your mind starts writing tragedy. They become distant, and your body starts fighting for reassurance. You send the paragraph, then another, then a softer one to undo the intensity of the first. You check their activity. You replay every word. You negotiate with their silence as if your love, properly explained, can regulate a nervous system that is already in defense mode. It cannot. That is the devastation. And the freedom. The more you chase clarity from someone in shutdown, the less clarity you receive. Not because they are cruel, but because pressure pushes them further from access to their own emotions. They do not become more honest under emotional pursuit, they become more defended. So if you want to understand how an avoidant shows authentic love, watch what happens when you stop feeding the panic cycle. Watch who they become in the space. Do they vanish with relief, as if your absence gave them permission to forget you existed? Or do they start feeling you more intensely when you are no longer reaching? Because that is often when the truth begins. When you stop pushing, they can hear themselves. When you stop over-explaining, they can feel the weight of your absence. When you stop anxiously holding the connection in place, they finally have to confront whether they were actually attached. And that is when many avoidants start missing in silence what they could not tolerate in closeness. They think of the way you looked at them when you were trying not to ask for more. They hear your voice in the pause after a long day. They reach for the phone, then put it down, then pick it up again. They tell themselves they want freedom, then feel strangely haunted by the peace they thought they needed. They scroll, they distract, they work, they numb out. Dopamine through novelty, busyness, control. But the body remembers where tenderness lived, and underneath that detachment, something starts to ache. Not because you played a game, because you stopped interrupting reality. That is the paradox. Avoidants often feel the depth of attachment most clearly in your absence, because absence is the first place where love no longer feels like demand. It becomes memory, longing, safety without immediacy. Missing you from a distance can feel less threatening than needing you up close. So yes, sometimes the silence makes them chase, not always outwardly, not always dramatically, but internally. Intensely. They revisit conversations. They wonder if they misjudged you. They miss the steadiness they once felt trapped by. They start to feel your value only after your energy is no longer available for consumption. And if the love was authentic, they usually do something with that. Maybe not instantly, maybe not elegantly, but something. They check in. They ask a real question. They attempt a vulnerable sentence and almost ruin it with a joke. They try to reconnect in a way that still protects their pride. They may not say, "I was terrified of how much you mattered," but they might say, "I've been thinking about you." For them, that can mean far more than most people understand. Because authentic avoidant love is not measured by intensity of words, it is measured by the degree to which they move toward connection despite the instinct to retreat. That is love in their language. Movement against conditioning, softness through fear, presence through discomfort. But listen carefully, because this is where people destroy themselves. Do not romanticize potential. Do not confuse hidden feeling with relational capacity. Do not build your life around what someone might feel if they were less afraid. Yes, an avoidant can love deeply. Yes, they can miss you, crave you, obsess over the version of you that lives in their private mind. Yes, they can feel devastated by losing someone they could not fully hold. But feelings alone do not build safety. Love that never learns how to stay still wounds everyone it touches. So if someone only loves you in theory, only misses you after distance, only reaches once you detach, only values you when access is gone, then what you are experiencing may be real emotion, but it is still an unstable home. And your job is not to become smaller so they can love more comfortably. That is where the pattern must break. Because the hidden addiction in these dynamics is not just their avoidance. It is your belief that if you can decode them perfectly, regulate yourself flawlessly, and love them gently enough, you will finally become the exception to their fear. Maybe, but maybe not. And if your self-worth is tied to becoming the one person who can finally make them stay, then you are no longer in love. You are in emotional servitude. You are auditioning for devotion. You are bleeding for a role no one awarded you. You are trying to earn what should be given freely. That has to end. The power flips the moment you understand this. Authentic love from an avoidant is not proven by how intensely they feel when you leave. It is proven by how courageously they show up when staying is hard. That is the standard. Not longing, not chemistry, not almost, behavior. Can they come back with honesty instead of breadcrumbs? Can they name their overwhelm without turning you into the enemy? Can they let your feelings exist without fleeing the room emotionally? Can they tolerate intimacy long enough to build trust, not just fantasize about it later in private? If the answer is yes, there is something real there. Fragile, maybe. Underdeveloped, maybe. Slow, definitely. But real. And if the answer is no, then your compassion must stop outrunning your discernment. Because love should not require you to abandon yourself just to keep someone else from disappearing. This is why non-reactivity becomes so powerful. Not because it manipulates them into coming back, because it returns you to yourself. When you stop scrambling, your nervous system begins to heal. When you stop personalizing every retreat, your mind becomes clear. When you stop treating someone else's shutdown as a referendum on your worth, something holy happens inside you. You become less available to confusion, and that changes everything. Now, when they pull away, you do not instantly collapse into fear. You observe. You breathe. You let the silence reveal what words were hiding. If they care, they will feel the loss of your overfunctioning. They will notice the absence of your emotional labor. They will realize that your presence was not ordinary. And if they are capable of growth, that awareness will call them forward. If they do not come forward, that also tells the truth. Either way, you win. Because now the connection is no longer being measured by how much pain you can withstand. It is being measured by mutual capacity. That is maturity. That is self-respect. That is love without self-erasure. Imagine this. They send a cold message after days of distance. The old you would have panicked, decoded every syllable, rushed to restore warmth. The new you reads it, feels the flicker in your chest, and stays anchored. You do not perform desperation. You do not punish. You simply refuse to overinvest in ambiguity. And suddenly, the energy changes. They feel it. Not because you became cruel, because you became unreachable through chaos. That is deeply unsettling to someone who unconsciously relied on your emotional availability as a cushion against their own inconsistency. When you stop cushioning, they meet themselves. Their choices echo louder. Your absence becomes more specific. The dynamic no longer protects them from consequence. This is when some avoidants start chasing, not because they suddenly became secure overnight, because your stillness interrupted the old script. Now they are the one wondering. Now they are the one replaying. Now they are the one feeling the silence press against their ribs. And the irony is devastating. The more you stop trying to force love, the more visible your value becomes. But be careful. This is not your invitation to become detached as a strategy, emotionally unavailable as revenge, or mysterious as a mask. False detachment only recreates the wound in a different costume. Real power is not cold. It is clean. It says, I can love you and still leave what dishonors me. I can understand your fear without making it my prison. I can see your heart and still require your effort. I can have compassion for your wounds without volunteering to bleed inside them. That is what changes the identity. Because the deepest transformation here was never about finally mastering the avoidant mind. It was about finally refusing to betray yourself in the name of being understood by someone else. And something beautiful happens when you reach that point. You stop obsessing over whether they cared. You start asking whether their way of caring is enough for the life you want. You stop making mystery feel romantic. You start recognizing consistency as intimacy. You stop calling your hypervigilance love. You start calling peace what it is, a standard. And from that place, if an avoidant truly loves you, you will know. Maybe not because they become suddenly fluent in emotion, maybe not because they turn into poetry overnight, but because they begin doing the brave, unglamorous work of staying open when every old reflex tells them to shut down. They return. They try again. They speak more clearly. They run less. They let your reality matter too. That is authentic love. Not perfect love, not easy love, but love that is no longer hiding behind defense as its only language. And if they cannot do that, if they only love you from afar, miss you in secret, admire you in silence, and ache for you only when you are gone, then let that ache belong to them. Do not carry it for them. Do not translate it into false hope. Do not make a home out of emotional weather. You were not born to spend your life decoding disappearing acts. You were born to become someone whose peace is so deeply rooted that confusion cannot seduce you anymore. Someone who does not mistake longing for alignment. Someone who does not beg for warmth from guarded hands. Someone who understands that self-worth is not loud, but it is immovable. And once you become that person, everything changes. Because now, whether they come forward or not, whether they awaken to the love they felt or lose it to the walls they built, your center remains untouched. You are no longer waiting to be chosen in a language that hurts you. You are choosing yourself in one that heals. That is the real power. That is the real shift. That is what makes you unforgettable. Not the chase, not the pain, not the performance. Your refusal to abandon yourself for half-lived love. And sometimes, that is the very thing that teaches an avoidant what love actually is. Not pressure, not pursuit, not possession. Presence without collapse. Distance without self-betrayal. Care without control. A love that does not scream to be believed. A love that stands still. And if they are capable of authentic love, truly capable, that kind of stillness will reach the place inside them that all your chasing never could.